the work of the um, health side of the foundation, or the way I work on the health side, is that is there a need for an organ? Is there a need for a piece? Is there a need for a function in the body? And one of the main things to ask is that, is there a need for a bone structure in the body of the man? Would the man be able to function, the human body, or any entity, without a bone structure? So when you start asking that question, then you start looking what are the reasons for existence or production or creation in the process of the evolution of that piece in the body, in the structure. As Elias said, we start a life with some 270 odd bones at point of birth, and or inceptions, when the bone structure starts coming together. And around adulthood we come to about 206 pieces plus odd pieces here and there. But why the body merges, joins, disposes of, adds to 70 odd bones in the life cycle? The other process is that in the body of the man, what is the real purpose? What is the real reason for the structure of the bone? You can call it different things. You can call it a bone marrow, you can call it the spongy part, you can call it a rib bone, a hip bone, the bone for the skull, and everything else. The main process before you start anything is to ask, as I said, is there a need for the bone structure? And then go back into the operation of the brain and understand why the physical part of the brain has decided to create such a bone. So what this means is that what is the function part of the brain has this? Why can't we live, can't we survive, can't function with a full intelligence without a bone? The bone structure of the man is no different than the bone structure of a fish. The only difference is that as we were created in the same kind of process, the fin, the tail fin, has a split into a half. We call it 2 legs. And the side fins has become the arms and the fingers. And if you look at the rest, the head of the fish has moved slightly higher, we call it the neck, but the rest is exactly the same as a fish, as same as any other animals. Why did, in the process of evolution, man or body of entity of the fish decided to make different bones? And how this process started? To me, to the work which I do in the health side of the foundation, there is no need for a bone for a man, the soul, to exist. But when you allow the emotional part exists, and emotional part has connected itself to a leech part, which is the physical part, compromises has been made. So what does this mean? This means I'm prepared to receive energy if the leech part, which is the physical part, can support the life cycle, which means, okay, I need lung to support it, my life, so I have to protect it. So there comes the rib cage. And then it comes into the process of why the heart sits next to the lung. Why heart and lung sit on the upper part of the body. Why don't we have our lungs in our toes and in our feet? Why the bone marrow and the lymph and the heart and the lung all work through one pump, which we call the heart. Where did the compromise come? Why the process has started? The whole entity of man does not need the bone structure. But in trying to get different functions and usage, the maximum use from what can support the energy side for the emotional part of the brain has been used to the full capacity. And it's been the best efficient way it can be done. The point is that when at the point of inception, when the first cells are made, when the main structure starts, who decides or where in the structure of the life decides that there is going to be a conversion or absorption or transfer of energy into calcium that becomes a bone. So when the fetus is created, there are no bones in it. What does decide? Who decides? What combination decides? That first of all, the calcium sequence comes in, then the pattern of the production of the bones come in what sequence, and then what apparatus is needed for this thing to survive on its own, to regenerate on its own. So the point comes in that does the DNA carry the information for production of the bone? Or does RNA informs the DNA, this is what you got to do, and the DNA sets up the procedure for physicality to come in? Then, if one understands this process, then you can understand the structure of the bone for each part of the body of the man or any animal. Bone is the physicality of the man, it's exclusivity of the man on this planet. So what has led, what has caused, what has generated the production of the bone, the calcium? Where does the information come in for lymph, which is within the womb of the mother as different form in the blood form, to become as part of the lymph of the child, and then that information transfers the lymph in its density, gravitational magnetic field structure, into a bone of the hip and a bone of skull and the rest. So if you look at this way, then you'll find out You look at the whole structure of the man, the bone, the muscles, the attachment, and the process in a totally different way, in a much simpler way, and in a way that you can interact with the bone structure. You're born in some part of the world where you're supposed to be short due to the climate, or to have a broader hip bone because of the way of living and the condition. Then you move to another part of the world where the structure of the bone is different, and if a child is born from the marriage or mixture of these two different type of bone, what decides the new formation? What kind of bone? What kind of a structure of the bone? And how this bone come together to be? As a plasma, then as a matter, then in what formation of the matter? Then it comes to one point. The structure of the bone is decided by the emotional part of the brain to guarantee the survival of the physical part that can guarantee the survival of the emotional part. So in every part of the human body, for every operation, we see a gland. We see the thyroid gland, we see glands over the kidneys. But why not? Why we don't see any glands for operation of the bone? Why the brain has decided that the operation of the bone will be controlled by the emotional side directly over the physical part? So bone structure has an importance in the most important existent part that is so vital that the brain has never decided to divide itself as a gland specifically for the bones. It is so important that the brain, the emotional part, directly over its physical part controls everything to do with the bone. Because without it, the emotional part will not exist. And it's the only place where the emotional part has decided to control everything. A bone structure is the most important, vital part of existence. And why the brain has done such a decision that to be there? It has put everything in one safe, in a hard safe. It's very much like you put your most important documents in a safe and you lock it up. You buy a fireproof safe and you buy a bulletproof safe. This is exactly what the emotional part of the body has done over the evolution. The bones are the safes of the body. The bone marrow. If the body gets attacked and germs or viruses or anything attacks the physical part, where is it made? Where is your defense technology? Where is your defense protection? Bone marrow, in the safe, where it is the less possibility of damage. Where does your conversion and production of the red blood cells and white blood cells are done? Without them, the heart cannot operate, the physicality part cannot operate, the emotional part dies. Operation is kept in the safe. where does the whole structure of the operation of the control of all the systems chemically needed majority is produced in and kept in the safe, in the bone structure. So when you're the boss and your life depends on what's in the safe, you don't give the key to somebody else to control it. If the world of medicine understands this connection, then they will understand how easily, through the emotional part, they can control all the diseases through the bone and the structure of the bone marrow, red blood cells, and the rest. This is how you divide it. You call it the skull, you call it the hip bone, you call it the rib bone. In operation, there is no difference between any of the bones. All the bones produce in a very minute way or very large quantity or effectively in a powerful way the same kind of material which are needed in the vicinity which they are working on, or they are responsible for to protect. Then when you do this, you create channels of supply and channels of disposal. When Elia shows the structure of the bone with all these soft bones and curvature bones and holes and different strands inside the bone, there is a reason for every single one of these strands. There is a reason for every one of the cavities in a sponge. They are not random. If you understand the nanotechnology, you will understand the structure of the bone to be in nano layers. The small gravitational fields in different holes, different conditions, which they create, they absorb, they create a condition to absorb or gravitate different materials to different strength to become part of the lymph, part of the blood, part of the cells which are produced within the bone marrow. I've said this before in different talks. Elia showed a bone and it shows the gravitational line from the hip down to the knee. If you understand what this line of the contact means, you will understand why your body creates a bone with a high density in certain places and then soft inside. Because the hard side, the soft side, they create a balanced field which, for example, absorbs surplus phosphor from the lymph or gravitational magnetic field of the phosphor. Then that plus the calcium, which is converted from the lymph into calcium due to the vibration of the bone, gets added to what? Gets added to your T cells, B cells. If you look at all the immune system cells which come out of the bone, they all have a calcium link. And with them, they have a phosphor link. The reason for phosphor, look at the structure of the DNA. The body, the emotional side, wants to guarantee that its information kept. in its RNA in conjunction with the existence of the DNA. That's the reason you find that in the bone marrow. At the same time, the emotional side wants to guarantee its existence, and calcium is important. So it makes all the time connections between the immune system and the bone connection, which is the calcium. So earlier explained to you from the human side the physicality of the skeleton. But from real point of existence, a skeleton, especially the way it's built around the movement of the body of the man, is literally the most fundamental part, because it carries the phosphorus, it carries the calcium, it carries the immune system, so it can guarantee the reproduction and conversion and adjustment into RNA and the DNA for the next generation. So the way we look at it from the space technology, then we can replicate all the plasmas which are created under different names within the bone marrow. But then you don't need to fight, you don't need to move, you don't need to create a bone marrow. You reach the emotional part of the brain, which knows what is wrong and what has been changed, and through it you reach the bone marrow, and then you guarantee the survival. So first of all, it has to be understood that why the bone are created for man, for the body of any animal. We have got too technical to look at the physicality, but we have lost the whole understanding of the purpose of the bone. Then when you look at the bone in this way, you will see why and how the emotional part has transferred the knowledge to the physical part, and at the same time the only piece of the whole human or any being on this planet which has got a bone structure is left with the boss, with the emotional part. So when we start talking about the structure of the bone, we speak about the control system in conjunction with the brain operation. Not a bone, a skeleton that is there to hold the weight of the hip, or the weight of the human skull, or the shape of the bone, because these are all physicality. Every dentation, every indentation, every crack, every hole which is made in any part or within the structure of the bone is total physicality, where the body in the brain has found or has preferred to be the easiest way to be done. If you look at the blood vessels which come from the bone, without those blood vessels, the immune system will not work. The lymph system will not work. Because one pump, which is the heart, is sucking the residual leftover, the sewage work from the body out what is body is not needed, what does body does not need. And in this process, it sucks the food, the, what do you call, the nourishment, the energy, through the walls of the intestine into the lymph. So then this pump, as it's sucking blood to circulate, the same circulation which goes through the section of the bone will suck the lymph through the bone structure. And in passing through the nano layers, according to the need of the body from the brain, which the information comes directly, the necessary materials are produced, converted, added, and sent out through the bone, into the blood cells, into the lymph, back to the body. So, in a way, the bone structure is a conversion factory. But the whole operation is run on one conveyor belt. In Keshe Foundation, we treat the body of the man as a galaxy. Everything is in it. Whatever you want to know about deep space is within the deep structure of the body of the man. They spend billions, and we do very little, but we achieve much more information much faster and in an easier way, and we have shown and we show how these easy ways are. There is no difference. If you want to understand the working of the bone, just go back in the workshop which was done yesterday by knowledge seekers. The nano layers inside the copper or outside the copper is exactly the same structure as the nano layers inside the bone of the man. And we've been told, I was talking to the knowledge seekers today in the lab. I said for a long time, everybody has said to us, proof of concept, show us something that they can be believe. And yesterday you lot have worked 6 months here and everything else, and you showed the light. They said, even if you can show a light, we believe in it. And yesterday they showed the light, they showed how they store energy in a battery, and that nothing. Because as a human being, you don't even believe in what you see and what you ask. So, to understand the function of the bone, you have to understand the function of the nanomaterials. You have to understand the function of the gravitational and magnetic field within the nanomaterials. Why you put a copper nano-coated with zinc coated metal and you continuously produce CO2. What does copper has got to do with zinc and what's got to do with CO2? Because in the nano layers of the copper which was produced, conditions are created which balances equals to copper oxide or calcium CO3 in nano layers, absorption and extraction. Now convert the same knowledge into the pores, in the holes, in the strands of the nano layer of the bone, and then you understand how in the same structure you extract phosphor from the lymph, why you extract all the necessary amino acids from the lymph, and once they come to the bone marrow, they become what you call them T cells and B cells. The conversion is done due to all these processes and the holes in nanostructure and in the total structure of the bone. So you want phosphor. There is no phosphor coming through the lymph, going through the holes and just appearing in the bone marrow. The energy of the phosphor, which is sucked through the walls of the or transferred through the walls of the intestine, which is within the lymph structure, once matches the gravitational magnetic field within the nanoporosity layers of the bone, manifests itself as a phosphor in the bone marrow, or it sucks in to come to become the bone marrow as the lymph is going through the holes of the bone. Then you understand there is not a way to handle the structure of the bone in the physicality the way it was explained by Elia. You have arm bones, you have finger bones. These are all to guarantee two things. First of all, that energy, and you can move to a position that the energy can be absorbed by the lungs, that the emotional side can exist. And secondly, the bones are there to make sure the function and the holding, that if you take all the bones, the finger doesn't drop off, that it cannot lift the foot, that it goes in the mouth, that it can guarantee the physical parts of the body to survive, that it can guarantee as a payoff for the energy to be absorbed by the emotional part. Then the whole picture of the bone structure changes from a scientific point of view, from a space point of view. Do other creatures have bones and what do you call it, cartilages in their body in space? There are structures which support these things, but not calcium. But why do we do this? Why do our body chooses this way of conversion? And we say they have nerves in it. As Elia was saying, there are nerves within the system of the bone structure. Bones are created through emotions. Bones, the structure of the bones has a direct effect in the emotional part of the body of the man. Because if you have to be short to guarantee the survival, because the opposite sex, which is the chooser, likes a short, so in the structure of the culture, the structure of the environment, the emotional part instructs the physical part, in this area we stay short, because this way we can guarantee to be chosen to pass on the information and the gene guarantee pool. Every structure of the bone, the shape of the finger of the bone is directly connected to the need and demand of the emotional part. And if the world of science understands this, then one will understand why in the old age we become frail and we have problems with our bones. This is all because in so many ways the body doesn't want to exist after a point. And the emotional part guarantees that through the bone, through the red cells, through the white cells, through the immune system, which is kept in the safe. A lot of reasons man dies, or man chooses to die, or the body chooses to finish with the physical part, is that the emotional part does not see any reason to be connected to live, and the physical part, which is controlled through the bone marrow, does the job. trying to end it in one way or another. Once the man finds a purpose for life in a way of no greed, but being pleasure to be alive, man will live like any other creatures in the universe, 600,000, 700,000 years, 2,000 years, the way man does on this planet. There is no difference between a tree which lives 2,000, 3,000 years in the jungle and a man. Why not? Man cannot live that long. It's just that we have chosen, and that fingerprint is embedded in the structure of the bone. So, from creation point of view, the way the structure of the body of the man is, bone is the most important part of the body exists. Even though you cut the limbs off or the arms off, you'll find out you still have an immune system. What happened, people which have both amputation or full amputation of arms and legs, they still live, they still have a life, they still create the blood red cells and white cells. Where do they get it from? The responsibility gets passed on to the work of exactly the other bones in the body which do the same thing. So the physicality in the position of the bone goes back to the emotion. And every bone in the body produces and has the capability to produce the full DNA structure replication of the RNA. As we've seen, people are born without hands, without arms and legs, and they still have a full heart operation. They still get all the diseases that other people get. So where does the bone marrow comes from them? Where does the immune system come? That we say is dependent on the main bone in on the leg. Because the emotional part guarantees existence, allows the other bones within the body to do the same operation and carry on with the same thing. Then you'll see in a lot of diseases like cancers, certain cancers immediately show themselves in certain positions as a secondary cancer on the bones of the body. Then you understand that has an emotional effect. And that's why in so many things we call as a bone cancer, we see for a specific position, for a specific diseases, what you call the bone cancer shows itself. So, as space scientists, as a space knowledge on the health, we look at the bone in its totality operation, not in numbers and the shape. So, in the next stage, when we talk health in respect to bone, we speak about how to create gravitational magnetic fields within the bone structure that can be accepted or change the gravitational magnetic field of the nano layers within the bone structure, which can lead to production of what is needed to boost the immune system, or to boost the T cells or the red blood cells. Then the approach to health is become totally different. It moves from the physical interaction to plasma and to plasmatic interaction, and then this way it's much easier to solve a lot of problem for the health part side. So you explain the bone as a physical part, and these are the holes, these are the where the blood cells come. This is where the yellow bone marrow is. From the space technology point of view, health side, we look at what cavity leads to production of certain gravitational magnetic field that converts the plasma within the lymph to the matter needed for the survival and production of the bone marrow, of the red blood cells. Ask always a single question. How come nothing comes into the bone from blood cells, from blood point of view, from a different vein, but this container continuously supplies everything out? Because when you look at the structure of the structure of the bone is a big sieve. And in that sieve, as the lymphs pass through, according to the position of the lymph, according to the gravitational magnetic field of the environment, as the lymph goes through, the material needed is converted and produced. And then you receive red blood cells in the bone marrow. There is no factory, nobody sitting inside the bone marrow and producing red cells. Now is the blood of, what do you call it, white cells. And now this is the lymph, and now this is something else. So the bone structure is a total gravitational magnetic field in the nano layers, exactly like a copper wire as we shown in the energy production. And when you put different energies together, different gravitational magnetic field together in a specific way, which the brain in the emotional part decides in totality of its work, then you understand the work of the bone. This goes back to a lot of people saying that man uses 5% or 10% or 15% of the brain. And then when you look at the brain, why is it so big and no part of it is rotten? Because if you use 15%, the other 85% should be rotting away because it's not used. All these parts of the brain, which physical part, which appears to man is not used, is continuously monitoring most part of it, the operation, the production, and the running of the bone structure. Major part of the brain, the physical part, is for development of the frequencies, what you call to convert, of the whole structure, of the porosity, of the size, of the strands, of the movement of every single bone in the body of the man, because without the bone, the emotional side cannot exist. Maybe for the first time, all these people who come with this nonsense that the body, the brain is not doing anything, functioning anything, is just there, understand that a major part of the operation of the brain, the working of the brain, goes in to look after, reproduce a precise size, shape, position, strength, strand within every single bone of the man. Because without the bone, there is no immune system, there is no blood cells, and the red blood cells are necessary for the heart, for the lung, to be able to transfer energy from the lung into the man. So it is so vital for the brain that controls itself without to somewhere else, because the emotional side, as Elia said, the bone, within the bone, the red blood cells are created. And as they pass along, the emotional part of the body dies or cannot function correctly. Then you understand why even the emotional side has protected a bone we call the skull for itself. Then the whole structure, the whole understanding of the world of health changes in respect to the working of the bone. Every bone structure is a depository bank for certain need of the body at the point of the need. So the brain knows what it needs, when it needs it, and it has to guarantee its own survival. So the operation, a major part operation of the brain, runs on a daily basis, every second, in looking after, changing, allocating, converting, extracting, supplying the bone, material to the bone and material from the bone for rest of the body. Now the world of health, the world of bone structure looks totally different. And this is why in the Keshe Foundation, in the health side, they say or they tell us we do magic, so we just use water. Because if you can send the right energy package which is getting absorbed and transferred through the intestine to the lymph to go through the bone marrow, you control the boss, you control the base, you control the intestine. So you can affect the rest of the chain work. They tell us that you only use water and air because you never understood the essence of the creation and the creation of the man. Through the water, we decide what goes through the bone structure to become your immune system, which in a way affects your own emotions, that affects your health. Then the rest of the things we do around the body is just physicality adjustment. When I can control the energy level which goes through your lung, through the air you breathe, through the cups we provide, then I can give enough to the emotional side that it makes the right connection information to the lymph at the point of passing through the bone to create the right immune system, the right insulin, the right material for the rest of the body to live a perfect life. So the physicians, the doctors who go and try to find different antibiotics and different materials to change the this disease and that disease, they start to understand. The production, the conversion, the strength of every fiber within the bone is decided within the intestine when you pass the energy through the wall of the intestine. Then you understand you do not need to feed food to the man, because through the same plasma condition, you transfer the right plasma in the right position by literally the water is a package gimmick to be able to transfer this plasmatic energy into the body to join the lymph. So in most of the time, the people who have used that health technology of the Keshe Foundation, I always tell them, when you breathe from the cups, the minute the air from the cup has touched your lips, the information and the energy is transferred. It's the same thing with when you drink the water. Because by the time you drink the water, the whole energy has passed through, instead of going through your intestine, to your body, through your, what do you call it, the mouth, already has joined your lymph operation. So the bone structure needed to guarantee the survival of the emotional part. And it's so fundamental that, as I said, the boss has decided I keep the control. the functions which are not important, but they're auxiliary, the body has decided to allocate the glands in different part of the body because it's too busy. But the work of the brain is so important for it to be responsible for the whole bone structure. And now you understand very easily why, in so many ways, our emotion decides the shape of our bone, the size of our bone, the way we produce cells, the way we protect ourselves, the way we decide the length of the life. So when next time you look at the bone, just don't look at the physicality. It's there because it carries the gravity, or it's there to protect the heart. It's there because the brain has decided this is where I need it to guarantee my survival, and if it needs 4 legs, I put it, make it a donkey. If it swims in the fish in the sea, I don't need to give it legs. It's too hard to swing 2 legs to swim. I join the 2 legs together. I call it a fin at the end. I always say, stand in front of the mirror and look at yourself. You see a fish with a split tail. You call it 2 legs. And you see 2 fins, side fins changed. Otherwise, there is no difference. And the same principle of working of the bone is the same for a fish, for a man, for a donkey, or any creatures which is dependent on the survival of the life through bone structure. Otherwise you'll be amoeba and in single cell. You don't need bone structure, but you still have intelligence. Now any questions?
What is osteoporosis in regards to what you're describing, Mr. Keshe?
Ask them what do they call osteoporosis.
I can put a picture of the bone structure on the live stream.
No. Ask what is explained as the osteoporosis in world of medicine. Define it, or has it been defined? Maybe Elia can explain to us.
Yes, osteoporosis is the less level of calcium in bones, and then they start to be more fragile and easy to be broke, and have different kind of levels of osteoporosis, depends of density of bones, and have devices where they measure the density of bones. And depends of the level, they started from osteopenia, and then when the level go up, this is some kind of measurement of the density of the bone, and then separate to the up to 4 or 5 levels. So the first is osteopenia, and then started osteoporosis, first grade, second grade, third grade, and so on. And mostly osteoporosis related with less level of estrogen, and the age of the woman when she reached the climax age up to 40, 45, 50, when the estrogen levels go down, started to get symptoms from osteoporosis, and the normal treatment in traditional medicine, they give it the calcium tablet with estrogen. So the traditional medicine believes that estrogen hormone helps to storage calcium in bone. Do you need more explanation?
Can you explain around what age does this happen?
When the woman reach the climax, when the period menstruation just stopped, mostly related with that. Or if something is wrong in the hormonal homeostasis in woman, I mean the hormones which related with reproductive system of the woman, or if
Do
some diseases
do
related with genes.
do you see this mainly in men or is it just in women?
It is so rare in men. Actually, they get the osteoporosis if they have hormonal disbalance also, or if they use some kind of diuretics. This is the drugs which make the urination, increase the urination, and they mostly use it when they have heart diseases, which is related with dysfunctioning of the pump function of the heart. The name of this diuretic is spironolactone. If someone use it, just to know. And spironolactone is like diuretic drug, just increase estrogen level in the men, and actually also they have it gynecomastia. I mean the glandule mame, the chest just growing like in a woman. Mostly it's related with that in men, but it is so rare. Actually, calcium impact, traditional medicine belief, is related with estrogen.
Can you tell us which bone usually get affected by this?
Hip, they measuring hip, and also they measuring um, sacral part of the spine, and now they have a new kind of scanners from osteoporosis, and they use it the vertebra also. They have to have density, these bones. It's not that much spongy.
But it's mainly traditionally connected to the hip bone.
Yeah, and sometimes they measure in the heel also.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason for this scientifically is again goes back to the allocation and the point of need. During the menstruation, the body, as I've explained in other parts of the workshops, the body looks for what is available, needed for the conversion in the fetus and somewhere where everything is near to. As I said, body, each bone has its own usage at the point of need is being placed in that way. During the menstruation cycle, every time that the body gets ready to give life, as I said and I explained this in a lot of my talks, is that the body provides everything for the party. It doesn't wait till the party, the guests arrive and then going looking for, but makes everything available ready that when, if the inception comes and the fetus is produced or started, everything is available for the fetus. Part of this is calcium needed in the form of the GANs, in the form of ready produced, absorbed gravitational magnetic field plasma. Where is the womb of the woman? In the cavity of the hip. So in the cycles, 12 times a year, the body takes a ready converted, what we call like a animal which chews, or the mothers which chew the food, and then they give it to the child because it's ready, can be digested. The body, the brain instructs the structure, the hormones and the rest of the operating part of the reproduction cells to go to places and take what is needed for the party for production. And the In the structure of the life of the woman, the hip is the closest place where large amount of calcium can be deposited and can be used in the soft tissue immediately when it's needed every month for the inception of the child. So every month the body takes a piece out of the hip, and this creates cavities, this creates weaknesses. So these are the holes. These are the what they call osteoporosis. This is the every time, and that's why men do not reproduce. Women do that in the womb. So as part of the cycle of the menstruation, every time the body goes to the bank, to what you call it, the storage place where you have already converted calcium, which is in the hip, and brings it ready into the womb, in the structure for the child to be born, and it's ready in the plasma of the lymph of the mother, that for the child to have it ready for it to be used. So that's why we see this disease only with women, and we see it in the what they call it, the porosity of the bone. And if men go through the same cycle, we'll have the same disease. And partially we see it in the spinal cord, in this what they call in the spine, in the lower spine, in some cases, and on the top of the upper bone of the legs, is through the same process. When the body is weak, this process, there is not enough calcium available from the hip, so the structure goes further up to where it's soft. Calcium is ready for it to be ready for the menstruation, for the cycle of the child to be born. In the case in 2005, 2004, 2005, we have shown that we see the same kind of structure of the prostate and the weakness in the man when the prostate cancer goes into the hip. The same side of cavity, weakness of the hip appears itself to show. And through the process we developed, we have managed to literally link up or seal or allow the body to reproduce calcium in the area of the hip to strengthen up the head. So in cases with a new understanding, you can produce, we've done this in 2 occasions as a trial. You create a condition where through like a seat, you create an environment that in a way like a bone fracture, where the calcium comes when you have a broken bone and it heals, or you don't, the healing is that you make a connection between the 2 sides with a new calcium, so you don't get a straight fusing. It's like a lump on the point of the fracture. We have seen in the x-rays and MRI done in the hospital in Holland that we get these prostheses like filled up with new calcium, but it's not filled up, it's just like it's like a little hill, little mountains that the calcium come and get trying to cover the hole. And in that process we seen the strengthening of the hip bone. So this disease comes only through menstruation and through because the body, the brain instructs the body to have a ready available calcium for the birth of a child, and it happens mainly in women. And now we see the movement into the spinal cord and even on the upper legs, what do you call it, the upper bones of the leg. It's just totally because of the diet which is changed, and there is not enough right calcium plasma available for the production of the child, or what do you call it, the birth of the child to be supported. So softer tissues further up on the internal side of the spinal bones are used, and we see that in that kind of process. So it is with the new present knowledge, this the hip can be what you call supported by the allowing, creating environment that you create a false environment that the body changes the lymph calcium into the calcium which has got the right gravitational magnetic field on the bone structure of the hip. And we don't see this with any other more or less what do you call it condition. It only happens because the womb of the mother or a woman sits within that environment near a soft available ready calcium, which is the hip, and it takes from it, so it makes indentation on it, and this indentation becomes like a porosity, because as you take it out, it does not get replenished by the same, what do you call it, same kind of calcium, because by the time it comes, it's like our nanomaterials, another piece is already built on it, so the cavity stays. The creation of capacity porosity with this disease is very much in very, can be explained like in nano layers. If the scientists look at it, is position, hole position. So the new calcium covers the top of the old hole and the material, so the hole in between stays. It's like a little grooves which Elia showed us in the structure of little cavities in the bone structure. This is only to do with the reproduction cycles, and that's why it's connected to the hormones. Because it's connected to the estrogens and the hormones, because your typical gravitational magnetic field trigger comes, that there's a time for a cycle of the birth, that triggers the what do you call it, the release and absorption of the calcium from one point and release to the fetus in the womb of the mother. And when the menstruation cycle stops, there's a disturbance in this, and then the processes are there. There is nothing can be done because the holes cannot be refilled. There is a misconception in the world of medicine, in a way, of public, is that when your physical menstruation is finished, everything else in your body stops regarding the reproduction. It's not so. Even though you don't go through the menstruation cycle, the body still goes and picks up the cavity and the hole, create the holes, but because the hormones are not there to reorder the, what do you call it, the filling up order, you start seeing these holes. So if you're 90 years old and your menstruation stopped when you were 40, the holes are still getting made in past 50 years every time your menstruation cycle month has come. And that's why hormones has a direct, because the right hormones, in a way, when you are young, in the process of menstruation, orders the body to fill up the gaps, or at least repair the gaps or cover them. When you get to the point of what you call the menopause, there is a disturbance, part of the information is lost, the body does not replace the holes, doesn't fill up. And then you see it as you see it, prosody and weakness in the hip, and then the hip fracture. And usually with the hip fractures, then it comes that through the poisoning of the, depending how the skin of the bone has been damaged and it's been interfered with. And then that caused partially through the poisoning of the blood. Elia can explain to you when it happens, when the content of or chemicals from the bone are released into the bone structure, into the blood circle. Next question.
Mr. Keshe, I had a question regarding that. How would the emotional part of the brain, or what some people might call the essence, affect that porosity with that bone problem? Can it be affected somehow through the emotional part of the brain once the damage is already done?
Depends where it is and what it is. They call it sometimes brittle bone. For example, if you have prosthesis or you have weak bones, you have to understand what has caused that in the structure. Not everything is emotionally based, but emotion have an effect on part of the operation which does not release the right information for the bones to create the right vibration to convert the lymph into the calcium plasmatic gravitational magnetic field.
So
You got to understand.
could someone change their attitude or their belief system, or somehow do some kind of
Something you
meditation or
inherit.
something?
Partially, maybe yes. Partially, in a way, no, because it is built into your DNA, RNA base.
Okay, would prayer
Sometimes it can be helped, and somebody can trigger it.
would prayer help? Either doing it for with the
I
person
don't
doing it or
know.
someone doing it
I
for them?
don't know. I don't know. I don't
Okay,
know. I cannot answer
that's
you that.
it's pushing
No,
it
you
too
don't
much.
go and break. You don't go break your bone and sit in there and pray, now heal, because my emotional side says you heal. You can create a condition to speed up the process. It's very easy. We had this discussion with Elia, and I've explained this before. You can create conditions that, in a way, the environment that allows the production of the calcium for repairs or increase of the conversion of the lymph into calcium at a given point in given condition. As I explained to you, I've done that to myself in my own case about 4 years ago, and it's well documented, and it's been everywhere. I broke 10 ribs, and within more or less 7-8 days, there were no sign of fracture. I mean, there were signs of fracture, but all the fractures on the broken bone ribs were totally, what do you call it, healed up. You can, because the technology, the knowledge is there. I've done it for myself, and every process has been documented in the hospital. You can do. You can create condition to change the condition of brittle bone or speed up the process, but you got to be there when the skin irritation and the cut of the blood vessels on the skin of the what do you call it, on the point of the fracture are fresh. Then you there, because of the activities, you increase it, and then you can allow the conversion of the lymph into calcium in a very, very rapid way. And he uses a very, very, very low gravitational magnetic field current flow. If in the near time, we'll show this, as Arman is producing a smaller and smaller reactors. In the coming time, we show you small reactors which you can, as a set, as a system, you can put at the point of fracture, and you can heal up the broken bones within a matter of days, hours.
Would that be would that be with a direct application, or would it be with the fields around the object that would be used?
Yes, you create the same, what you do, what your bone does inside the bone to convert the convert the plasma within the limbs to calcium to become part of your bone, because the oldest piece of your body is your thymus, your, what do you call it, your femur, which is 9 years old, part of it, and that's due totally to its mass and its size. Because even the calcium in your body has a life cycle, and it gets absorbed, it loses its life cycle, gets absorbed, and get what do you call it, disposed of through your disposal system. But you can create the same kind of vibration and plasmatic gravitational magnetic field at the point of the fracture, at the point of the break, at the point of the creation. So you can allow, create gravitational magnetic field where the amputation has taken place for a leg, for example, in the future, that it creates gravitational magnetic field of what do you call it, the calcium of the bone of the amputated position, and you allow the bones to grow because the information coming from the brain for the development is there and it gets responded back to and you grow. This is how we grew the toe 5 years ago, 6 years ago with the lady. The pictures is well documented, is on the internet. But it's just trying to teach in a coming, now that we start the medical side, at this moment for the next few months, we try to call the theoretical part. And then we start teaching how to make these systems. How to be able to do these systems that physicians can do it. Hopefully we'll receive more doctors and people who understand both sides of the mechanical, electrical and the plasma conditions and the medicine, or what I call the biology of the man, then they can build system much easier. We have started, as you know, this process now. Now we are working directly with doctors who slowly I'm trying to teach to take over. We have a number of doctors around the world who will start monitoring their volunteers, monitoring the process of the volunteers, and then I start teaching them how the system works and then how to build the systems for different occasions and problems. This is the same thing that in the bone structure, any bone, you call it a bone cancer, or the secondary bone cancer through what do you call it, through other cancers. These all can be reversed, can be allowed to be reversed, and the new fresh bone calcium to be produced at the point of need. Where you see what has been damaged or been softened through lymph density to the calcium that is become the strength of the matter and the calcium level. Then you understand in so many ways why when a man dies only bone is left behind. Because the bone conversion in the calcium is in a specific way very much near, but not exactly, near enough to the calcium structure under the atmospheric gravitational condition of this planet. That's why it does not get dissolved and stays as a bone. I have written a paper why the bone of the man stays behind in the majority of the cases unless the field's condition are changed, which then it like flesh, this what do you call it, dissolves back into the gases. There is a direct connection in how and what and the way the bones stay behind, and they don't, that's the only bits we find as calcium as the man exists. Any other question?
I have one question, sir. I just want to clarify for all the public what is the difference between the molecule of calcium and the McGrath state of calcium. And we understand the calcium is one molecule, but we have different kind of McGrath state of calcium, and they storage in different place of our body. So could you please clarify this?
In a way, yes. In a way, even though everything looks like calcium, what you call molecule is not a molecular, is very much like a GANS in a more less water connection between it, what we call the GANS of calcium, is connected to different elements which are attached to it as part of the plasmatic condition. What this means is that the bones in different, the calcium in different part of the same bone has a different field strength that it can expand into, and that is that sponginess of the same calcium compared to the hardness of it in the middle is created and dictated by what material in gravitational magnetic field strength have been made available by the brain in that environment. Very much like cartilage. The cartilage, the reason you have the spongy bit immediately under the cartilage is because the texture, the gravitational magnetic field of cartilage allows separation of the calcium in a much open way. What we call gravitational magnetic positioning, or in a way that there is more space for it to grow. So it creates the effect of the look or the appearance of the sponginess. When you get to the middle of the bone, that is not needed. So the bone gets created from the top and it comes down to the center. It gets absorbed into, due to its maturity, into the what do you call it, the bone marrow, and then it becomes part of the T cells and B cells. And depends when this calcium as a gravitational magnetic, not molecular, is reached a field strength, at that point joins or gets absorbed into the bone marrow, and then it becomes part of the strength of the immune system. And depending on what radioactive material strength it will carry with itself. And then what the body allows as a potassium, calcium connection to be part of the potassium 40 to be absorbed, and at the same time the carbon in the amino acid will convert into the part of the energy source through hydrogen to the what do you call it, to the bone marrow. This I have explained in the paper. So we don't look at the molecular calcium, we look at the magnetic gravitational as a GANs, and then according to that position of the GANs and the environment around it, it dictates how spongy, how tight the calcium becomes. And then the material which are converted within that material, within this gravitational magnetic field, have a direct effect on the calcium and merger of the fields of the material and the calcium. Then you see them as a calcium with phosphor, calcium with zinc and other things which they distribute around the body of the man. We don't look at it as a molecular. Calcium is matter state, and in the body we don't have a matter. Everything is in a Cancer state, gravitational magnetic field, and that's why calcium changes. But in the condition of the Earth gravitational magnetic field, it is near enough to the molecular that it shows itself as to be molecular calcium.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, Sandos have a question. Can sodium depletion weaken the structure of the bones?
Pardon?
Can natrium deplementation weaken the structure of bone? I think he's meaning what is the relation between sodium, between natrium and calcium in structure of the bones? Can they convert to each other, or how they're related to each other?
They are related to each other, but
If I may add to this question, I was asking about sodium depletion. So if somebody has a very limited intake of sodium, can that cause a weakening of the bones?
Can you give
I think
exactly what
when
you
you
mean?
have a less level of natrium in your body, can be this
So
cause to decrease level of calcium. Increase
it can
in
affect the
increase,
can affect it, but not direct.
yeah, can
Not the,
affect us.
it depends on it depends on the environment which it is created and is working. Because depends the sodium behaves as a metal or it behaves as a magravs of the metal in a given condition. This I see this because in Africa they use this what do you call it, the liquid with the water, which is a mixture of salt and sugar for the people who have diarrhea, the children who have diarrhea, changing the salt content, and that salt as a sodium affects the operation of the lymph as it processes energy, plus in conjunction with the what do you call it, hydrogen carbon bond of the sugar, then you see that affecting. And then in some cases, if the condition is within certain range, they can work and affect each other. Yes, you got to understand in what shape and how, in what position it comes to be. It can affect, it can interact, but the interaction is on a plasmatic level, not as a sodium as a element.
Mr. Keshe, is the radioactive form of sodium play a part in the body?
Explain yourself.
Well, I understand that there's a form of sodium, sodium 22 isotope, that is radioactive. And we know that, like for other elements, potassium has been talked about, potassium 40, and how important radioactivity in the body is to make cell division occur and that kind of thing. I'm wondering if sodium might play a part in that. And is the radioactive form of sodium part of what you call GANs, or is that totally not associated with having that higher energy isotope form necessary? Does that make sense?
You just, because what happened, a lot of ways we digest and we have in all the salts we use, it's not all the same. We always have a factor of radioactive through the decays of the material of any element in the body.
That's right.
Even
There's
the
there's
tables.
always a trace amount, right? 1 out of a million or a billion atoms or
So
whatever are going to be
that's
radioactive.
just,
It's natural.
yeah, but that energy, it just gets transferred into the plasma of the lymph.
Into the plasma of the lymph.
Of the lymph, yeah. There are we are considering at the moment there is a process which at the moment I've been working on in past few months in respect to the amount of radiation which has been inhaled and digested and getting digested in Fukushima. So these radioactive material didn't just fall on the land. It has been inhaled, digested on regular basis within the intestines of these people in Japan. looking at, we
Also,
continue.
can I just throw in a little piece of information that I've also found about that is radon gas, which is happens in the basements of people in many places in around the world, is enough that you are inhaling roughly 25,000 radon molecules per breath. And that's what we deal with on an average around the planet. It's in the atmosphere already. So our
We need
body works with that. It knows what to do with it.
body will not divide. The body of the man will not divide, evolve, recycle without the radioactive material. The whole purpose of creation, the whole process of creation evolved based and done through radiation and radioactive materials. From the seconds that you are, what do you call it? The first fetus is created, the first division is created in the body. That division will not happen if there is not energy for it to be given that division can be created. There is no life, there is no existence on this planet, which is any kind of life, isn't planet life, without existence and presence of radioactive condition. But it depends on what level and how you receive it. We've seen people in Japan now, they've been eating, drinking, breathing cesium, tritium, every other kind of you don't want to know the list of radioactive materials which are at the moment in Fukushima on the land. I've been given a list by the authorities and it frightens me to death. But that's the reason I start looking. What happened to these people? None of them are dropping dead. They're still inhaling it, they're still touching the ground, they're still playing, they're still swallowing so much radioactive material. How does the body react to this so much radiation? We don't see any of them glowing. We don't see any of them, what do you call it, going around with the radioactive detectors and seeing them going blip, 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 blip. This shows that the body has created within its process a barrier of not accepting certain radiation over a certain limit. We know this exists in the intestine. So when there is a high density, unless it passes through a different way, the body finds a way to very much like the way we put the gans of CO2 and the gans of copper oxide in Fukushima into the soil, and we saw how the radiation diminished so rapidly. In the intestine, this is what we are looking in now. The body must be producing a specific type of gans that does not even go in the stomach, that does not even reaches the intestine to be absorbed by the body to become part of the lymph. So it neutralizes these radiations. We've seen it, we've done it, and the Italian Nuclear Center confirms the finding. And now the Japanese authorities in checking documents have confirmed the same. So one of the wonders has been with Fukushima, what happened with all this radiation these people are eating and drinking? How does it get neutralized that we don't see it in the body? Partially some of it will come through the intestine and will be absorbed, but we will see as different diseases in the future, or changes, not diseases. But what happens with this massive inhale and intake of the radioactive high radiation material? The only conclusion at the moment we can look at is that the acidity within with the enzymes of the body convert themselves, as they should do, we've seen, into a gas state of the CO2 or a gas state of copper oxide that they absorb or invert these radiations to themselves, and as you go to toilet we dispose of it. because we do not see any traces in the urine, or not that much. So our body automatically does what we have shown in Fukushima, instantaneously converts the radioactive material, and even there is a high possibility that in our saliva, the brain does it automatically through the saliva. Saliva, even it looks like a water, it's a gas liquid state. So you don't see so much mouth cancer and tongue cancer, even with these people breathing so much of the radioactive material. This is a process I'm looking at for some times now, for in respect to high radiation radioactive area of the Fukushima. And this has given us a good insight about the resilience of the body of the man, and not necessarily all radiations are dangerous, because the body finds a way to cascade them and get rid of them. I think one of the things which I even suggested, there is a meeting going on next week with the in respect to Fukushima and Keshe Foundation. One of the things we have to look at or look into is the what do you call it? The process of discharge and what's in the discharge of the body of the man in the solid state. How much radiation and in what form the radiation is getting discharged. And then it gives us a very good insight that how come this radiation does not get transferred, or this energy does not get transferred through the lymph of the body. So it must be cascaded before, otherwise we should see a lot of throat cancers, we should see a lot of mouth cancers. We don't see that. We see thyroid cancer because that comes through the closeness of the thyroid gland on the saliva, which sits under the tongue. The radiation release is very rapid and is at the length which interferes or interacts or gets what do you call it, amalgamated with the lymph cells.
Mr. Keshe, I've done a little research with the radon gas, and it's the second largest cause of lung cancer in North America, at least, and I think in the world, in that sense, behind smoking.
Yeah.
It is a problem in places that are in developed countries that have concrete basements and that kind of thing, but it's in the atmosphere all the time. But most people don't have a problem with it. It's only very rare.
It depends what condition you have within your lung. Again, it's the condition which is like asthmatic.
They did find out that if you're a smoker and exposed to the radon gas, then it more than doubles your chances of lung cancer in that case. So it is multiplied that way, like you say. Yeah.
It's a condition you create in the environment of your lung. Don't forget, your lung is a huge, massive radioactive reactor, and is full of extreme ultraviolet. If the scientists send the extreme ultraviolet at a very, very high dosage, but very low, what do you call it, capacity, they'll be surprised how much radiation is going on in there. It's the same thing as the upper atmosphere. It's the same condition, it's a replication of the same thing. Any other question? We were supposed to have this session for 2 hours. Elia wanted it not to extend. Now we passed.
We just finished with the last one question from the live stream. This is, could you explain effect if man stays for a longer time in a zero gravity environment?
Pardon?
I will repeat. Could you, Mr. Keshe, explain effect on the bone structure if the man stays for a longer time in a zero gravity environment, like astronauts or you use the
We already
spaceship?
know that. In a spaceship, you don't have zero gravity. In a spaceship program, you have exactly 1G. As I always said, and the guys in NASA laugh, I said, the what do you call it, floating man in the space, what do you call it, zero gravity or weightlessness, it's actually one part of the Keshe space program a couple of years ago we used to have. You have to pay extra for us to create weightlessness for you in the space because it costs money to do it. When you, Armin is laughing his head because he's working on these small reactors at the moment. So what it is, because you create gravitational magnetic field environment, you always are at 1G. What we've seen, the space suits and the spaceman, these are the games of NASA and it's over. This weightlessness does not exist. But if you stay in a space with a, what they call lower gravity magnetic field, you affect the same thing as you do we see in the operation of the spongy part of the body. You create different environment, different gravitational magnetic field, then the field, the strength and pressures are different, then you're bound in the long term to extend the bones or shorten the bones. But weightlessness and change of the structure of the body, these are all finished. This is done and buried with gravitational magnetic field systems. That's what it's called, magravs, magnetic gravity. I had a very interesting email. The guy says, let's forget about maggrav, talk about the rest of the work of the, what we can do with the work of the foundation. Because it's so simple, people have to deny it, because then otherwise it shows how stupid they've been for centuries. How can you have life when there is no gravity? And how can you have life when there is no what they call magnetic or what we call atmospheric field pressures? It's a combination of the two, and our reactors produce both magnetic and gravity. So zero magnetic field, zero what they call it, gravity, or what they call weightlessness. It was the time of when man used to wear those heavy suits with steel and go down deep in the ocean. It's over. Now we have really fancy little fancy suits, and we go in as deep as we like to go, with a couple of what they call it, backpack oxygen tanks. Weightlessness doesn't exist. You have to pay heavy for it to create a. I tell you why. It might look funny or sound funny to you. If you want to create a weightlessness condition in space, or at least put you outside in the space, that you can feel the zero gravity as the astronauts do, it's so difficult because you have to reduce your gravitational magnetic field boundary to a point that you can cross it in the space. Because don't forget, once you have gravitational magnetic field, it's exactly like atmosphere. How do you get in it? How do you get out of it? You have to literally shoot the people in a specific angle out of your craft that you can end up in the space. It costs a lot. It takes a lot of time. It's a fun. It will be done. But it's very much you have to shoot somebody out in a specific angle that they can get out of your gravitational magnetic field zone. But you do this by sending up satellites of your, what they call a spaceship. This is one of the part of the defense technology which we'll teach very soon. Every craft, every satellite can be literally remotely attached to and removed through the same process. You open a condition, you create a condition that you can literally target a satellite or a craft, which gets attached to, and on its own you can remove it without ever coming back to you. If a satellite contaminated, is a body contaminated with radioactivity, you don't want to bring it back into the spacecraft. You launch a remote craft, which can leave your spacecraft in a safe condition, and still you don't lose your for defense technology people. If they knew what they can, and we start teaching it. Because we don't teach it for defense as it is today, we teach it because it will be needed very soon. Now that we have all these rogue satellites floating everywhere and everything else, we wait for them and pray that when they come back in, they will not land on top of our head or on top of our house. Very soon they'll be captured in a very easy way from through the space technology, and they'll be disposed of into the open space beyond the atmosphere. Because a lot of them are contaminated, heavily contaminated. You don't want them back in. Then you don't want to go there and catch them and tow them. So weightlessness, go and speak to boys in NASA. They'll love to talk about it because they have huge swimming pools practicing it. Next question.
I think we should probably end things there. It's been well over the 2 hours that we expected. What do you think, Elia? Would you like to have a final ending?
To have information for the next part.
We'll speak next Friday at 2 o'clock again.
Yeah. And thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much, Elia.
And for everyone, and I want to apologize again for delay about the technical problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Elia. Thanks, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Boy, that was great. We'll do better next time with the technical, and it'll all get sorted out. It's a good first effort, I think.